Hello there folks, it is Toby here from TIJ Music and welcome to today's video. Today's video we are going to do an album review of an album from 1969. Today we are looking at Neil Diamond's fourth studio effort, his second with Uni Records, and that is Brother Love's Travelling Salvation Show. As I said, his second with the Uni label, following the Velvet Gloves and Spit album that you can also see a review of in the channel. But make sure you stick around for this one and then go and watch that one after this. But the cover depicts Neil Diamond, as you can see on the right here, with his new beard, and it's got a nice gatefold, and it's certainly got a different feel to the previous three albums, just from the artwork really. You can see from the artwork straight away it's got a different feel, and that's depicted again with the album as a whole. I'll just put this back here. Go on, first time. That should stay there. That should stay there for the first time. It's just got a different feel compared to the first three albums. You could see Neil was sporting his new beard, whereas on the previous albums he's quite clean shaven, and that is really represented in the tone of the music as well, and the experimental tone that he had on this album, and that continued into, of course, massively into Taproot Manuscript in 1970. But this was a real move from the New York scene. Music was starting to move away from there, and Neil Diamond recorded this album with the American Sound at the American Sound Studios in Memphis, Tennessee, where Elvis would be recording at the same time. 1969 was when Elvis started his comeback, so tracks like In the Ghetto, etc., and Suspicious Minds were pressed at around about the same time as Neil Diamond making this album. But Neil Diamond, our Jewish Elvis, of course, got in just before Elvis, but when the King started to come in, of course, Neil Diamond had to rejig his schedule slightly, and that's why maybe some of the tracks on this album are coined second rate, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. But the version that I hold up and you can see behind me there is actually a rarer edition of this album, because 4 months after this album was released, a track that some of you might be aware of called Sweet Caroline was recorded and released by Neil Diamond. And given it was so popular, I think it went to number 4 in the Billboard charts at first, correct me if I'm wrong, but that gave the label reason to stick it on the end of the album, and the later pressings of the album had a new sleeve, a new cover. You should be able to see it up in one of the corners if I show it. And every album, every reissue of this album after that was coined Sweet Caroline / Brother Love's Travelling Salvation Show. So a bit of history, and I've got a rare edition there, and also, not blowing my own trumpet, but it's even more rare because I've got the nice rainbow label, as you can see. There we go, it's fully in shot there. I've got the nice swirly rainbow label, whereas the common edition of the UK version of this album, well, the more common edition is the secondary sleeve, but the more common of the two, if you like, that were released before the new sleeve, had effectively this sleeve without the pink and green and yellow swirls. It was just that with the basic yellow and green design. So again, a little bit of history, but I'm sure you're not too bothered about that. And we can start talking about the album, as that's flicked off there, and I'm going to just leave it behind me now. But the first track on this album is the title track, Brother Love's Travelling Salvation Show. And this was really the first hit for Neil Diamond since he joined Uni Records the year prior. Given nothing on Velvet Gloves and Spit really got any traction, and the lead single from that album, or at least the top single from that album, Brooklyn Roads, had a high of number 58 on the Billboard Hot 100, and this track had a high of number 22. So a big jump from 22, of course, to 58, not even getting in the top 40. But this is a great gospel-driven track. It's a real, true Neil Diamond great. And he wrote this track on the plane to Memphis, actually, and it's a break from the usual introspective tracks that we saw on the previous album, the likes of Brooklyn Roads and Shiloh beforehand, and it's a real character-driven track, and this was the track that really cemented Neil Diamond's position as a showman. You can see that on the Hot August Night record. This is the final track on the Hot August Night live album, along with Suleiman or Solomon, or however you want to say it, but you know, it's a real sublime track, and the roar of brothers and sisters and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but the sermon he gives, I'm trying to allude to there on Hot August Night. But, you know, it's just sublime. And that version on Hot August Night is really worth a listen if you haven't done already. But 10 out of 10. Simply put, this track is a 10 out of 10. We then move to track number 2, and this is called Dig In. And unfortunately, you're always going to struggle, particularly with a Neil Diamond album, to follow up a sublime opening track. We saw it on Beautiful Noise, Stargaze was the second track. We saw it on September Morn. Mama Don't Know was the second track again. Yeah, nothing compared to the previous one. And with Stones, I Said was followed by the cover of The Last Thing on My Mind. However, this is definitely unique. This was the B-side to the single I mentioned earlier, Sweet Caroline. But it doesn't really go anywhere lyrically. You've got that dig in, and the cool little distortion. I think it's the piano the distortion comes from. I'm not entirely sure, but that's cool. But all that being said, it's tolerable, but not really a Neil Diamond highlight, and they all can't be. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. And we move on now to track number 3, which is called River Runs, New Grown Plums. A comment that hurts me a little bit as a Neil Diamond fan is the review from AllMusic that says, it was William Ruhlman who did this review, that states that some of these songs are second-rate and unfinished sketches rather than developed compositions. But in this case, I am inclined to agree. I think this comment applies to both Diggin' and this track that we're covering now, River Runs, New Grown Plums. Doesn't roll off the tongue, that one. But it goes somewhere, but it stutters a little bit. It is rather basic, you have to say, particularly given the bombast, the title track. It's tolerable. It's a decent album track. I'm going to give it a 7 again. I think maybe in retrospect, Diggin's more towards a 6.5 and this one's more towards a 7.5. But we'll say with the normal rounding up to 1 decimal place, I suppose. But yeah, we'll give this one 7 because I'm feeling a little bit generous today. Then track number 4 on side 1 is something that really shows another comment about this album that is really true and bang on. The slower tracks, the ballads, are probably better than some of the others, and some of them don't really go anywhere like the previous two, and that is Juliet, track number 4. This is a real highlight of this album. I included this on my show I did back in January, 10 Neil Diamond deep cuts from the 60s, and that inclusion really would still definitely apply to these days, but I do like all the commonly known tracks on this album. We'll cover a few more of them later. But this is most definitely a deep cut. Yeah, it's the usual 2-verse, 2-chorus arrangement, so it's nothing special there. But Neil's voice, the subtle arrangement, particularly the piano, makes this track really sweet and compelling. And therefore, it's a great listen. So I think this one is probably an 8 out of 10, I would say, on that. Track number 5 out of, 12, is called Long Gone. Not the Bryan Adams track from Reckless, but anyway, I covered Reckless a few weeks ago, so that's why that came into my mind. But this has a really distinct 60s sound. It's almost halfway between the basic structure of Dig In and the bombast, the title track. You know, very, very different. And this almost fits in slap bang in the middle. It's subtle, not spectacular, but it keeps the album ticking on. Again, it's a good listen, but probably restricted to a 7. It's a classic example of an album track. We then move on to the final track of this side, and talking about the King again, the King Elvis. We'll cut to the chase with And the Grass Won't Pay No Mind. I love Elvis, and Neil Diamond is the Jewish Elvis, but the cover that Elvis Presley did of this track is not the best version. Okay? Good. This track, And the Grass Won't Pay No Mind, is Neil Diamond back in his true, purest songwriting vein that we would see later on tracks like Play Me and, I Said, etc, etc. Even though Play Me was clearly about his guitar. But this is a beautiful track. It's a true Neil Diamond classic, and the even slower, softer version on Hot August Night is probably a step better than the studio version. Probably an 11 out of 10. But the studio version is still beautiful, so a rubber stamp 10. But then we move on to the start of side 2, and we've got a bit of a theme running. Track number 7, this is Glory Road. We've got a bit of a theme running with this album. The opening and closing sides are classics. We've had it with the first track, the closing track to side 1, and now the opening track to side 2, Glory Road. I can't really think of many Neil Diamond tracks that are as deep as this, to be quite honest. And I think the topic of this track is something we can all relate to at some point in our lives. You're going to have to hear me out here. But obviously at this point of Neil Diamond's career, it's all starting to take off a little bit. But of course that comes with touring commitments, which I think at base is what this song talks about, with the different locations and all that. But I think there's a deeper meaning, particularly with that line, I know Glory Road won't set me free. It's almost about the fickleness of fame, but also I think in our lives we're all chasing, whether it be a dream, an ambition or a goal, and sometimes it might not be as good as what we expect. Bit of lovely pessimism to cheer you all up there. But this was an excellent foreshadowing to Neil Diamond's troubled relationship with Fame, it's fair to say. And that really showed the break he took after the Hot August Night tour, and had that little break towards the comeback albums with Serenade and, of course, Beautiful Noise. Beautifully arranged, this one. Sublime lyrics. Again, another rubber stamp 10 out of 10. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Track number 8 then, Deep in the Morning. And I think at this point, I know that this is like pretty much all Neil Diamond albums. There never was a perfect Neil Diamond album. Stick 60 tracks on a compilation, and it's probably the best compilation that's ever lived. But his albums, for some reason, were never quite perfect. But you would always listen to that Neil Diamond album waiting for the classic, because it could be anywhere in the album. But I don't really have too much to say about this one, because again, it's just that typical album track that doesn't really go anywhere for me. Fairly repetitive, doesn't really go anywhere. I'm going to be harsh here. I'm going to coin this one at a 6. I know it's harsh. Track number 9, If I Never Knew Your Name. And this is probably the weakest of the slower songs on the album. And that'll probably make me unpopular in some quarters. That's fine, I don't really mind that. It's good, If I Never Knew Your Name. And Neil hits the high notes pretty well on this one. But it just got that repetition. It's not anything special. And again, it's just got that feel of what a lot of these tracks have, that they're a little bit rushed and, yeah, I suppose experimental might be the other word for it, but I try with some of these tracks, but they don't hit me straight away like the likes of And the Grass Won't Pay No Mind, Glory Road, Brother Love, and so many tracks that followed that made Neil Diamond so great. It does. So, it's good, but doesn't personally jump out at me, so this is a 7 out of 10. And that rating continues for track number 10, which is called Memphis Streets. And this has actually got some groove. To be fair to this track, it's not one of those that doesn't go anywhere at all. But the stupid la 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 and na na na, it starts to do my head in by the time we get to this point in the album. And I can see some similarities between this track and Holiday in Blues from the previous album. All right, it's not massively similar, but there are some subtle similarities in there, but it does leave you wanting just a little bit more, which I feel is a theme from a lot of stuff in the 60s. I really do. I think a lot of tracks in the 60s, they were good, they got a bit of groove to it, but they just wanted a little bit more. Discuss, potentially. But I think this is definitely a 60s sound, Memphis Streets, and perhaps would have maybe fitted a little bit more on the bang stuff. Maybe the first album, I don't know. With some of those, again, maybe more unfinished compositions and, tracks that haven't really got as much to them. I think it would maybe fit a little bit more on there. But again, it's listenable. It's tolerable. 7 out of 10. We then come to the penultimate track, You're So Sweet, Horseflies Keep Hanging Around Your Face. Would many people get away with that track title? Probably not. But Neil Diamond does. And I can't, still to this day, can't quite tell whether Neil Diamond is being serious or whether he's not being serious here. But whether it's deadly serious and a deadly serious attempt at country, or it's just a clear parody, I think it's great. Some critics say it's absolutely awful. It's up there with the Pot Smokers song. No! No. This is got a catchy chorus, corny but good lyrics. It's basically the classic country formula. And compared to some of the weaker tracks on this album, where this ranks higher, maybe more than even more than a novelty factor, is that it actually tells a story. And some of the tracks just go on and don't really go anywhere. This one has a real storytelling, typical Neil Diamond charm to it. And I don't know whether it fits as well as on some other albums. This just has, and it's tricky to describe and put into words, but this just fits on the Brother Love album. Again, strange, but it just does fits. And this is the last time I'll say, I promise, but the version on the live album is absolutely brilliant. Not everything that Neil Diamond has to do is down here with ballads or Cherry Cherry Sweet Caroline. It can just be something that's a little bit out there. And that can work. And as I said, no, that does not include the Pot Smokers song. I'm proud to say this is great, but I think 10 is a little bit far, so I'm going to go with a 9 out of 10. Final track then on this album, Hurtin' You Don't Come Easy. And this is probably best known as the B-side to the later track from Touching You, Touching Me, Holly Holy. But it's a good closer, I have to say. It's probably a second-rate version of some of the great tracks I saw earlier on in the album, but that's not necessarily a harsh critique, if you understand what I'm saying there. It's good, it's possibly great. And the lyrical content's probably better on this track than a few of the tracks beforehand, but just doesn't hit me in the same vein that some of the earlier tracks do. And while this is a good album, you know, there are no duds here, really not, but a lot of these tracks just leave wanting that little bit more. It just almost hits that barrier, it hits the ceiling and doesn't quite go a little bit higher. That's the only real analogy I can sort of give for this. But those are the top 12 tracks. There you have it. And the verdict to this album comes out very high. And I think this is of a ilk of it being, even though I've just said in completely on the contrary, it's quite a consistent album, albeit that some of these tracks aren't great, but none of them are terrible. And that's what gives this a good rating of 7.9 out of 10. And I think it's clear that the outstanding tracks, the 3 10 out of 10s, pick this album up a lot. But there aren't any duds. So it's a solid album, although most of the tier is probably second rate. But that probably translates as good when it comes to second rate material of Neil Diamond. And amazingly, this actually narrowly beats Beautiful Noise in my ranking, which is a surprise. It beats it, albeit by 0.1 of a percentile, but you know, that's the way it goes. I don't think the verdicts, though, that I present are a definitive ranking. I'd probably put Beautiful Noise above this, purely on the fact that I would probably pick more tracks from Beautiful Noise over this album. I'd obviously pick the 3 big tracks, Juliet, probably just those 4, actually. Maybe just those 4. And then from Beautiful Noise, you'd probably have, you know, if you were to do a concoction between the 2, Beautiful Noise, Lady O, if you know what I mean. The list goes on, but I think if you're ranking it by that, then Beautiful Noise comes out on top. But in terms of the ranking system that they use at the moment anyway, this album does come out on top. So what do you think of the album? Let me know down below. It is probably the rarest of the first 4, the one that maybe has got the least heard tracks on it, ultimately. Because Brother Love was a hit, but ultimately none of the other stuff was. And The Grass Won't Pay No Mind, Glory Road, probably just those 3. And probably You're So Sweet probably were on, you know, the greatest hits albums and they're fairly well known. But apart from that, a lot of these are probably what you would consider Neil Diamond deep cuts, ultimately. So, you know, is that your thing? Is it not? Let me know down in the comments. This has been the first Neil Diamond review for a while and I have really, really enjoyed it. If you have too, make sure to chuck a thumbs up on the like button down below. Comment your thoughts as well and subscribe for regular album reviews, top 10s and all the rest of it. We've got a good back catalogue of stuff now, so if this is your first video with me, I've done a few Neil Diamond reviews in the past on Beautiful Noise, Velvet Gloves and Spit, and a few specialist Neil Diamond videos as well. So if that's your thing, make sure to go and watch some of those. I'm sure there'll be 1 or 2 floating around in the end screen in just a second. But if you've enjoyed that, leave a thumbs up down below. I have been Toby from TIJ Music, and I'll see you all next time for the next album review. Thank you very much for your company, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye for now.